I used to think most people who vanished without a trace had a reason to, like they were running from something or into something. You tell yourself it makes sense because otherwise it's too disturbing to sit with, too unexplainable. My mum used to watch those true crime shows when I was growing up, the ones with the dramatic reenactments and the stoic narrators. I'd catch glimpses of them while passing through the living room. And even then, I could sense the pattern. The runaway spouse, the person with gambling debts, the one who wanted to start over. There was always a narrative thread to follow, something that let you say, that's why. But Josh didn't fit any of those ideas. And the more I think about it, the less I understand what really happened. I didn't know Josh that well, not personally anyway. He was more of a friend situation, someone who showed up to parties, usually sat on the edge of the room with his back to the wall, always nursing a drink longer than anyone else. Quiet guy. Not weird, just faded into the background. You'd talk to him for 10 minutes, walk away, and forget half of what was said. I remember once at a birthday thing for a mutual friend, I ended up next to him at the makeshift bar. Really just a kitchen counter with bottles lined up. He asked what I was drinking, and I said something about wanting something that wouldn't leave me with a hangover. He smiled, not a big smile, just a slight upturn of the lips, and mixed me something with soda water and lime that tasted better than it had any right to. Electrolytes, he said, like it explained everything. That was Josh, helpful in this quiet, unassuming way that you didn't fully register until later. But he was close with Liam, and Liam was my housemate for 2 years. That's how Josh ended up around us sometimes. Late night hangs, IFA tournaments, beer on the kitchen counter while we argued about whether Die Hard counts as a Christmas movie. Stuff like that. Harmless. One night stands out in my memory. It was raining. One of those sudden summer downpours that feels like the sky just cracked open. We'd lost power, so we were sitting around by candlelight, a little drunk, a little bored. Josh started talking about encryption, about how most people don't realize how fragile their digital privacy is. It was the most animated I'd ever seen him. His eyes caught the candlelight, and for a moment he seemed more present than usual, more substantial. Then Liam made some joke about tinfoil hats, and Josh retreated back into himself, laughing it off. But I remember thinking there was something genuine in that moment, something that mattered to him. He didn't really talk about himself much. Most of what I knew came secondhand through Liam. Apparently Josh had done a bit of coding work, freelance gigs, that kind of thing. Always had some side hustle going. The kind of guy who could rebuild your router or jailbreak a phone with one hand while eating cereal with the other. I didn't think much of it until he disappeared. I still remember the night Liam told me. We were sitting on the couch half watching a movie. Something dumb and loud with explosions that neither of us was really following. I was scrolling through my phone, probably on Instagram or whatever, looking at pictures of people I barely knew living lives that seemed impossibly put together. The kind of mindless scrolling that fills time but not much else. Then Liam's phone buzzed. He looked down, frowned, and just kind of froze. The way people do when the message isn't long, but it's heavy. It's funny how you just know, isn't it? How the air in a room can change based on the look on someone's face. I asked what was up, and he said Josh had gone missing. Like, actually missing. No one had heard from him in 4 days. Didn't show up for work, didn't answer texts. His flatmate said his room looked like he left in the middle of something. Laptop still open, half a bowl of cereal on the desk. And I know this sounds stupid, but the cereal part got to me. I couldn't stop picturing it. Milk going warm. Soggy loops stuck to the sides of the bowl. It just felt human. Like a timestamp. Like those plaster casts they make of Pompeii victims, frozen in the middle of ordinary life. I kept thinking about how we all leave these small accidental monuments to our routines. The coffee mug left on the counter, the book splayed open on the couch. The difference is, most of us come back to them. I asked if he thought it was serious. Liam said he didn't know. He looked worried though, in that way where someone's trying not to sound dramatic, but it's already past that point. We both kept watching the movie, but I don't think either of us could tell you what happened in it after that point. It was just noise and light while our minds were elsewhere. That was 3 years ago. Josh was never found. I'm not telling you this because I think I know what happened to him. I'm telling you this because of what Liam told me, 6 months after the fact, and because I still think about it, more than I probably should. It's like a splinter under your skin that you can't see, but you keep pressing anyway. One of those thoughts that surfaces at 3 a.m. when you're trying to sleep, or when you're standing in line at the grocery store, or driving home on autopilot. It started, apparently, with a link. Josh had been on the dark web, not uncommon for him, according to Liam. He was into encryption stuff, played with Linux builds, one of those guys who liked testing boundaries for the sake of it. Not in a dangerous way. Just curiosity that didn't have an off switch. I remember thinking that seemed right. There was always something about Josh that gave the impression of someone who wanted to know how things worked from the inside out. I once saw him take apart a broken coffee maker in our kitchen, spread the pieces across the table like he was performing some kind of mechanical autopsy. He fixed it too, said it was just a loose connection. When I asked how he knew what to look for, he just shrugged and said, "Things usually break in the simplest way possible." I think about that line sometimes, wonder if it applies to people too. But this time, he found something that rattled him. Liam said Josh came over one night and brought it up like it was no big deal. Just mentioned he'd stumbled into some live feeds that didn't seem staged. No usernames, no chat, just video. At first, Liam thought he meant pirated security camera streams. That kind of thing had been floating around for years. But Josh said it was different, that the page he found wasn't public, that he only got there through a string of relays he couldn't retrace. He said it had a name, something like room service or guest room live, and when it loaded, the screen was black except for a red countdown timer. Liam said he asked what happened when it hit 0. Josh just stared at him for a second, then said, "Nothing I ever want to see again." That was it. He didn't go into detail, didn't describe what he saw, but something about the way he said it stuck with Liam. And honestly, the fact he didn't say anything, that's worse, isn't it? You can't put it in a box. Your imagination does all the work. I've done it myself, lying awake at night, trying to fill in that blank space with something that would make sense of what came after. But every scenario I come up with feels both too extreme and not extreme enough to explain someone just vanishing. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where you're not sure if you have all the pieces or even what the final picture is supposed to look like. The part that gets me, the part that keeps replaying in my head, is what happened next. Liam said Josh started acting off, not paranoid exactly, but distracted, edgy, like he was running low on sleep. He'd message at odd hours, ask strange questions. Would you tell someone if you saw something online that might have been real? Stuff like that. Not accusations, just thought experiments. Except you could tell they weren't hypothetical. I've been there before. Not with anything like this, but with that feeling of carrying something heavy that you can't quite name. That restless energy that comes from knowing something's wrong, but not being able to articulate it. It makes you feel like you're vibrating at a different frequency than everyone around you, like you're watching the world through glass. Then, about a week later, Josh told Liam he thought he was being followed. He didn't sound scared, just annoyed, like it was inconvenient. Said he kept seeing the same guy on his street, same coat, same build. Thought maybe it was coincidence at first, but then the guy showed up across the road from his flat 2 days in a row. Just standing there, smoking. Didn't move, didn't look at him, but he knew. That detail always strikes me as so human. Not terror, not panic, but annoyance. Like finding out your card's been skimmed or your identity stolen. That particular brand of victimhood that feels both personal and bureaucratic at the same time. I wonder if Josh knew, on some level, what was coming. If the annoyance was just a way of processing something much larger and more frightening. Liam asked if he called the police. Josh laughed. Said there wasn't anything to report. Just a guy on a public street. No threat. And besides, what would he say? That he watched something he shouldn't have. And now, he had a shadow. That was the last time they spoke in person. A couple of days later, Josh stopped replying to messages. Calls went straight to voicemail. Then his flatmate reported him missing. When the police got involved, they didn't find much. No signs of forced entry, no credit card activity. Phone last pinged near his apartment. Laptop was gone. So was his external drive. I remember the days right after, how surreal everything felt. We'd be doing normal things, making dinner, watching TV. But there was this heaviness in the air, this awareness that somewhere, not far from us, something had gone very wrong. It's strange how someone's absence can be more present than they ever were. And here's the part Liam didn't tell anyone else. The part he told me when he was drunk one night after we'd both had too much. We were sitting on our tiny balcony, passing a bottle back and forth, watching the street below get quieter as the night deepened. The kind of night where secrets feel like currency, where the darkness makes it easier to say things out loud. He said Josh left something behind. Not a note, not a message, a USB drive. It was taped under his desk. His flatmate found it while cleaning up, didn't know what it was, and gave it to Liam. Liam waited a week before opening it. He said he almost didn't. Said he was scared of what might be on it. But curiosity got the better of him. He plugged it into an old laptop with no internet connection. There was only one file, a text document, no title. Inside were coordinates. That's it. And underneath them, do not watch. I remember asking him, did you look them up? I was picturing one of those crime show moments where the hero types the coordinates into Google Maps and there's a dramatic zoom, something meaningful revealed. Reality is never that clean though, is it? He said yes. Of course he did. It was in the middle of nowhere, rural land, up north, near a disused industrial park. Nothing there. No houses, no traffic cams, no reason for it to be marked. I wondered aloud if he'd considered going there. He looked at me like I'd suggested setting ourselves on fire. Would you? He asked. And I had to admit, I wouldn't. Not alone anyway. Maybe not even with company. There are some doors you don't want to open, some questions better left unanswered, but that doesn't stop them from haunting you. And that was where Liam stopped. He said he didn't want to know more, didn't want to dig. He formatted the USB drive and threw it out. Said he was done. But I could tell it still ate at him. He would bring up Josh in strange moments, like when we'd be walking home late at night and pass someone standing too still under a street lamp, or when the internet would lag just a little too long. He'd glance at me and say something like, "I wonder if it started like this." I catch myself doing the same thing sometimes, noticing patterns that probably aren't there, getting that prickle on the back of my neck when I see someone take a photo of me in the background at a bar, wondering if my webcam light is really off when my laptop says it is. It's the kind of paranoia that feels both irrational and completely justified, depending on what time of day you're thinking about it. There was something else though, something that happened after that, something Liam told me months later when we had both moved on, sort of. We'd stopped talking about it as much. Life had settled back into its routine, work, socializing, the ordinary cycle of days. But some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding. He got a package, small, no return address. Inside was a phone, prepaid, burned, no SIM, just a photo on the screen. It was a screenshot of a paused video, grainy, low light, but clear enough. Josh, tied to a chair, eyes wide, gagged. The timestamp on the video was the same night he vanished. That was all it showed. Nothing before, nothing after. Liam didn't tell the police, said they wouldn't believe him. And maybe he was right. What would they do with a burner phone and a screenshot that could have been faked? Without a body or concrete evidence, it was just another strange piece in a puzzle that didn't seem to have edges. But I believe him, because I saw the picture. He showed me, once, before he smashed the phone and threw it in the canal. I remember that night vividly. We stood on the bridge, watched the phone break the surface of the water and then sink, leaving barely a ripple. It was a cold night, our breaths fogging in front of us. Neither of us spoke on the way home. What was there to say? We'd just disposed of what might be the last known image of our friend. Evidence of something neither of us wanted to name. And the worst part wasn't seeing Josh like that. It was knowing he was looking straight at the camera, like he knew someone was watching. And maybe, deep down, he hoped it would be someone who cared. He was never seen again. Sometimes I wonder if that was the whole point. Not just the stream, the process of someone watching it, someone knowing about it and carrying it, like a kind of witness, whether you want to be or not. I've thought about this a lot, about the weight of being a witness to something you can't fully understand or explain, about the responsibility of carrying someone else's story when they can't tell it themselves. It changes you in ways both subtle and profound, makes you see the world differently, makes you question things you used to take for granted. Liam stopped talking about it eventually, but I don't think he forgot. I know I haven't. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I find myself searching for those coordinates again. I never save them, never write them down, but I keep looking, keep zooming in on that patch of nowhere land, as if the satellite image might show something new, as if the truth might suddenly come into focus if I just look hard enough. It never does, but I keep looking anyway. I think I always will. I still remember the exact moment I realized it wasn't a prank. There was something about the bruises on his face that looked too real, too painful. And his eyes, God, his eyes as he stared directly into that camera. I've never seen genuine fear like that before, not from Jay. It started innocently enough. Just another weird link my friend Jay had found on some obscure forum. He was always sending us these things, supposed red rooms or whatever, from the dark web. You know how it goes, always with a bunch of laughing emojis, like it was all just a big joke, and it always was, until it wasn't. Jay was the kind of person who exhausted you just by existing. Actually, that sounds harsh. Let me rephrase that. He had this constant need for attention that could be draining. He was always staging these elaborate pranks, fake ghost encounters on video calls, prank calls to forum moderators that he'd record, and once he even created this whole fictional stalker just to get karma on Reddit. The guy lived for reactions, any reaction. I usually just went along with it. Never fully believed his stunts, but I'd play along because, well, he was my friend. Sometimes his pranks crossed lines. Occasionally they were genuinely funny, but mostly they were just a lot too much. So when that Red Room link appeared in our group chat, I didn't even bother clicking. Just another one of Jay's attempts to get us all worked up, I thought. But something felt off that week. Jay wasn't his usual self. He wasn't bombarding the chat with his typical nonsense. He wasn't trying to one-up everyone's stories. He was just quiet. I remember thinking maybe he'd finally grown bored of his own antics. Or perhaps he'd been banned from some platform again. But I kept coming back to the last thing he sent us. Something about this link being legitimate, about using headphones, about being warned. Then he disappeared. At first, I didn't think much of it. Jay had a habit of vanishing for days at a time, usually chasing after some girl he'd met online. He'd resurface eventually with wildly exaggerated stories that none of us believed. But this time felt different. It stretched on too long. On the third day, his mother called me. I still get chills thinking about that call. Her voice had this tremor to it that I'd never heard before. She explained that Jay hadn't been home, that his phone was completely off. I tried to reassure her, told her it was probably just another one of his elaborate pranks. But there was this moment, this awful, gut-wrenching moment, when her voice broke while telling me he'd left without his camera. Jay never went anywhere without that camera. Ever. It was like an extension of himself. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I promised I'd come over to check his room, maybe look through his computer for any clues. I wish I could go back to that moment. I wish I'd just stayed home. His room was exactly as he'd left it, messy, full of half-finished projects. I checked his laptop first. Nothing unusual. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed his desk drawer was slightly open. I probably wouldn't have looked inside if it had been closed completely. Funny how such small decisions change everything. There it was, a flash drive hidden behind a stack of old Polaroids, labeled with red marker, if gone. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just hand it over to his mother, or maybe to the police. But curiosity, or maybe a misplaced sense of responsibility, got the better of me. I took it home and plugged it into my computer. What happened next still haunts me. The drive auto-launched a single file. No name, no extension. Just static at first, and then there was Jay, tied to a metal chair. The lighting was dim, like there was a single bulb hanging somewhere just out of frame. He was gagged. He was crying, trying desperately to communicate something. He looked genuinely terrified. Not the fake scared he'd do for his videos, not acting. This was raw fear. I had to pause it. I physically couldn't continue watching. I remember standing up so fast my chair tipped over. I paced around my room, trying to convince myself this was just another one of his elaborate stunts. Maybe for a film project. Maybe for some weird internet challenge. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. When I finally worked up the courage to look at the drive again, something impossible had happened. There were now 3 videos. I swear on everything I believe in. I hadn't downloaded anything else. I hadn't clicked anything. They just appeared. The second video was worse, much worse. Jay was still in that same chair, but his face was now swollen and bruised. His lip was split open, and his pinky finger, I still have nightmares about this, it was just gone. The stub was wrapped in dirty-looking duct tape and gauze, but it was clearly missing. And the way he looked at the camera, it was like he was looking directly at me, silently pleading, that same light swinging somewhere above him, creating these shifting shadows across his face. You know when something is so horrific your brain refuses to process it? When you keep telling yourself it must be fake, even though every instinct is screaming that it's real. That's where I was, staring at my screen, hands shaking so badly I could barely move the mouse, telling myself it had to be special effects or some digital manipulation. But it wasn't. It was real. It was happening. Then the screen glitched. For just a second, everything went black. When the image returned, there was text on the screen. Just one word: vote. I scrolled down without thinking, and that's when I saw them. 3 buttons below the video: remove left hand, pull tooth, no water for 24 hours. I froze. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Was this some kind of sick interactive video? A game? I didn't mean to interact with it at all, but I hovered my cursor over the no water option, just to see if it was actually clickable. The screen blinked. A message appeared. Your vote has been counted. I panicked. I ripped the flash drive out of my computer so violently I'm surprised it didn't break. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I couldn't stop shaking. I was convinced I'd done something terrible, that I'd somehow participated in whatever nightmare Jay was trapped in, that I'd made things worse. Later that night, after hours of pacing and panicking, I checked the drive again. There was a 4th file. Same setup, same chair, same swinging light. But now Jay was blindfolded, still gagged. There were these horrible marks on his arms, like wires had been wrapped around them and pulled tight. I could barely bring myself to watch, but I forced myself to. I needed to understand what was happening. At the very end of the clip, just before it cut to black, Jay moved his lips. There was no sound, but I could read what he was trying to say. One word: run. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I kept seeing his face when I closed my eyes. The following morning, I took everything to the police. The drive, the videos, the voting page. I showed them all of it. I was desperate for them to tell me it was all an elaborate hoax, that Jay was fine, that this was just some dark corner of the internet playing tricks on me. But they couldn't say that. Instead, they told me there was no way to trace where the files had come from. The metadata had been wiped clean. The source was encrypted. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. They took the drive as evidence and told me not to share anything about this online. Then they sent me home. That was 3 weeks ago. Jay is still missing. His room remains untouched. His camera still sits on his desk where he left it. His mother calls me every day, asking if I've heard anything new. I never know what to tell her. I've deleted our group chat, blocked everyone else who was in it. I don't even open my browser without a VPN now. I've become paranoid about everything digital. Every link, every file, every innocent-looking attachment. Sometimes I dream about that swinging light bulb, That dull, rhythmic sway casting moving shadows. I can hear it even when I'm awake. That faint, creaking sound. The last thing Jay told us before he disappeared was that clicking the link could get us killed. I laughed it off then. I'm not laughing anymore. It's been 3 months since that night on my couch, and I still haven't used my laptop properly since. I've bought a new one actually. I just couldn't bring myself to even turn the old one on again. Some things you just can't unsee, and what I found in my own bookmarks folder still gives me nightmares. I've always been a bit of a tech hoarder. I'm the type who never deletes emails, keeps screenshots of everything, and has about 50 tabs open at once. My friends always joke about it, how I'll save articles I'll never read and bookmark pages just in case, but never actually go back to them. It's not like I'm disorganized exactly, just reluctant to get rid of things. My digital life is a bit like my flat in that way, cluttered but with a system that makes sense to me. I work in IT support for a small company in Sheffield. Not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills, and I genuinely enjoy solving technical problems. I'd been with the company for about 4 years at this point, and part of my job involved testing different browsers and tools to make recommendations for our staff. That's my excuse for why I had so many random programs installed on my laptop anyway. That Friday night in January, I was just lounging on my couch with a beer, scrolling through Netflix, but not really finding anything worth watching. It was freezing outside, one of those damp, cold Yorkshire nights where the chill seems to seep through the walls. I'd pulled my favorite blanket over me and had the heating cranked up, just feeling a bit bored and restless. I decided to finally sort through my digital clutter, something I'd been putting off for ages. It felt like a productive way to waste time, if that makes sense. I started with my email, 16,000 unread messages, got overwhelmed immediately, and switched to something easier, my browser bookmarks. I use Chrome as my main browser, but I also had Firefox, Edge, and a few others installed for work purposes. I decided to go through them all, starting with the ones I rarely used. When I opened Firefox, I was surprised to see how many bookmarks I had in there. I barely even use this browser except occasionally for testing things. The bookmark folders were pretty standard at first: work resources, recipes I'll never make, holiday research from a trip I'd planned 2 years ago. But then I noticed one simply labeled utility tools. I didn't remember creating it, but that wasn't unusual. I'm always saving random software tools and then forgetting about them. When I clicked on the folder, there were only about 5 bookmarks inside. Most were what you'd expect: a password manager, a file conversion tool, some kind of coding resource. But the last one caught my eye because it didn't have a proper name, just a string of random characters followed by .onion. I'm tech savvy enough to recognize an onion address when I see one. It's a dark web address, the kind you need the Tor browser to access. But I didn't remember ever saving anything from the dark web. I'd heard about it, of course, and was curious about it, like most people in my field, but I'd never actually gone through the effort of exploring it myself. What was strange was that Firefox shouldn't even be able to open onion addresses without being configured specially. I figured maybe I'd set it up years ago and forgotten about it, or maybe the bookmark was just copied from somewhere as a reference. Out of curiosity, I clicked it, fully expecting to get an error message. Instead, a loading screen appeared. My heart did this weird little jump in my chest. Firefox shouldn't be able to do this. It shouldn't be connecting to an onion address. I'd never installed Tor or configured any special proxies on this browser. At least, I didn't think I had. Before I could process what was happening, the page loaded. It was a simple black background with what looked like a video player in the center. No text, no navigation, nothing else on the page. just a video player showing what appeared to be a still image of an empty room, some kind of basement or storage area with concrete walls. There was a timestamp in the corner showing the current date and time. I remember sitting up straighter, the blanket falling off my shoulders, suddenly very alert. This had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it wasn't actually a dark website, just something designed to look mysterious. I moved my cursor to close the window, but then the image on screen shifted slightly. It wasn't a still image, it was a video feed, and someone had just walked into frame. The figure was mostly in shadow, but I could make out a person moving around what looked like a workbench against one wall. They seemed to be arranging items, though I couldn't clearly see what they were. Something about the deliberate, methodical movements made the hairs on my arms stand up. This didn't feel like some random webcam feed or art project. There was purpose in those movements. I should have closed the browser immediately. Any sensible person would have. But there's this moment of paralysis that comes with seeing something so unexpected. Your brain needs to catch up, to make sense of what you're witnessing before you can react. The figure turned slightly, and light from somewhere off camera illuminated their face, or what should have been their face. They were wearing a plain white mask with just eye holes cut out. The kind of thing you might find in a craft shop, meant for decoration. The contrast of that blank white face against the shadowy room made my stomach clench. As they turned further, I could finally see what they had been arranging on the workbench. Tools, knives, pliers, what looked like surgical equipment, all laid out with careful precision. Next to them was something that looked disturbingly like restraints. That's when the reality of what I might be watching hit me. This wasn't just some weird art project or practical joke. This looked like preparation for something terrible. And somehow, inexplicably, I had a bookmark to it in my browser. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I got up and paced around my flat, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. How could I have a bookmark to something like that? I never visit the dark web. And how was Firefox even able to access an onion address? After about 20 minutes of panic, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had used my laptop at some point, but I rarely let anyone borrow it. Could it have been a virus or some kind of malware that added the bookmark? But why would malware direct me to what looked like a live stream? I needed to check if what I saw was real. I opened my laptop again, but this time I didn't click the bookmark. Instead, I looked at its properties. The bookmark had been created 8 months earlier, according to the metadata. 8 months. I tried to remember what was happening in my life then, who might have had access to my computer. Then I remembered. About 8 months ago, my laptop had been stolen from my car. I'd reported it to the police, but miraculously, it had been recovered a week later. Found in a skip behind a shopping center across town. Nothing seemed to be missing or damaged, and I'd run antivirus scans that came up clean. I'd assumed the thief had just taken it, realized it was password protected, and dumped it. But what if they had installed something on it first? What if they had configured Firefox to access the dark web and left that bookmark deliberately? The thought made me feel physically ill. I'd been using this laptop for 8 months without realizing someone had tampered with it. What else might they have installed? Were they monitoring me? Had I been an unknowing participant in whatever disturbing thing I'd just witnessed? I couldn't bring myself to check the bookmark again. Instead, I shut down my laptop completely, unplugged it, and shoved it under my couch, as if putting it out of sight would somehow make what I'd seen less real. The next day, I took the laptop to a friend who works in cybersecurity. I didn't tell him exactly what I'd seen, just that I'd found strange bookmarks I didn't recognize and suspected my laptop had been compromised when it was stolen. He offered to wipe it completely and reinstall the operating system, which I gratefully accepted. When he was examining it before the wipe, he found something that chilled me to the bone. There was indeed a hidden configuration that allowed Firefox to connect to the Tor network. But more disturbing was a small program running in the background that seemed to be taking periodic screenshots and accessing my webcam. The timestamp showed it had been active since shortly after my laptop had been recovered. For 8 months, someone might have been watching me through my own laptop. Someone who was connected to whatever horrible thing I had glimpsed on that live stream. I've since bought a new laptop and taken every security precaution imaginable. I cover my webcam, use a VPN, and regularly check for any unusual software or connections. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm still being watched somehow. What keeps me up at night isn't just what I saw, or even the knowledge that someone had access to my computer for months. It's the question of why. Why put that bookmark there? Was it a mistake? Or was it deliberate? A way to show me they could access my personal space anytime they wanted. Were they trying to recruit me into whatever disturbing activity they were preparing for? Or was I somehow meant to be a future participant in a much more terrifying way? I'll never know for sure. And maybe that's the most disturbing part of all. That bookmark wasn't just a random link. It was a window into something dark that had been hiding in my own digital space for months, silently watching and waiting. I want to tell you about something that happened to me last February. It's pretty messed up, and I haven't really told anyone about it until now. I figured it might be worth sharing, both to get it off my chest and because, well, maybe it could prevent someone else from falling into the same trap I did. It all started when I received an invitation to test out a new VR experience at a place called Neo Sensory in Manchester. What was supposed to be a simple tech preview turned into one of the most disturbing experiences of my life and opened my eyes to a dark reality hiding behind cutting-edge technology. I've always been into tech, especially gaming and VR. I studied computer science at university but dropped out in my final year when my anxiety got too overwhelming. Since then, I've worked various tech support jobs, most recently at a mobile phone shop in Manchester. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me connected to the industry I loved. In my spare time, I ran a moderately successful gaming blog where I reviewed indie titles and new VR experiences. It wasn't huge, maybe 5,000 monthly readers, but enough that I occasionally received invitations to preview events or beta tests. That's how I ended up at Neo Sensory last February. Their PR team emailed me about a new VR experience center they were opening in an old industrial building near the Northern Quarter. According to the email, they were pioneering next-generation haptic feedback technology that promised to blur the line between virtual and physical sensation. They were offering free sessions to selected tech enthusiasts in exchange for feedback before their official launch. No obligation to write positively about it, just an honest assessment of the experience. I'd heard vague rumors about neosensory on some tech forums, whispers about military funding and experimental neural interfaces, but nothing concrete. What caught my attention was a comment on a dark web discussion board I occasionally monitored for my blog, where someone claimed neosensory had developed technology based on classified research into pain response management. At the time, I dismissed it as the usual conspiracy nonsense that circulates in those spaces. Now, I wish I'd paid more attention. The neosensory building itself was impressive, a converted textile factory with the original brick exterior, but completely modernized inside. The reception area featured minimalist white furnishings, ambient electronic music, and staff dressed in matching grey uniforms. I remember thinking it felt more like a high-end spa than a gaming center. The receptionist scanned my invitation QR code, had me sign a digital waiver on a tablet without really giving me time to read it, and then directed me to a preparation room. This first room contained what looked like standard VR equipment, headsets, haptic gloves, and the usual motion sensors, but with some modifications I hadn't seen before. Most notably, each set included what they called neural feedback pads that attached to your temples, wrists, and the base of your spine. The staff member explained these would enhance sensory immersion by creating precise neurological feedback loops. It sounded impressive but vague, the kind of technobabble that tech companies often use to make simple concepts sound revolutionary. After a brief orientation, I was led to a private booth, a space about 3 meters square with padded walls and a suspended harness system that allowed free movement while preventing you from hitting anything. The staff member helped me into the full gear: headset, gloves, feedback pads, and a lightweight exosuit that applied pressure to various muscle groups to simulate physical resistance. Once everything was connected and calibrated, they left me alone in the booth. The VR environment loaded up, presenting itself as Consequence Level 1. The virtual space appeared to be a stark white room with various objects on pedestals: a glass of water, a candle, a rose, a block of ice. A floating interface invited me to explore physical consequences in a safe environment. It seemed like a basic haptic demonstration program, designed to showcase the system's ability to simulate different textures and sensations. I began interacting with the virtual objects and immediately noticed the extraordinary fidelity of the sensations. When I touched the virtual ice, my fingertips felt genuinely cold. The candle flame produced actual warmth. The rose petal's texture was impossibly realistic. I tried dozens of haptic systems before, but nothing came close to this level of sensory precision. I remember thinking this technology must have cost millions to develop. After about 10 minutes of these basic interactions, the environment changed. The white room dissolved, replaced by what appeared to be a realistic apartment interior. On a virtual screen on the wall, text appeared explaining that this was Consequence Level 2, where I would experience emotional and physical cause and effect in a realistic environment. The objectives seemed simple: complete everyday tasks, while the system created appropriate sensory feedback. As I moved through the virtual apartment, interacting with objects, I began to notice something odd. Occasionally, when I performed certain actions, dropping a plate, closing a drawer, turning on a tap, I would hear faint sounds that didn't seem to match the virtual environment. Something like muffled gasps or sharp intakes of breath. At first, I assumed it was just part of the ambient sound design. But the sounds occurred inconsistently, only following specific actions. The system guided me through increasingly complex tasks, eventually introducing stress elements like time challenges. During one timed cooking simulation, I accidentally knocked over a virtual pan of boiling water. The haptic feedback delivered a mild sensation of heat to my arm, but more disturbingly, I distinctly heard what sounded like a cry of pain from somewhere outside the simulation. The sound was quickly masked by the program's audio effects, but it left me unsettled. When I completed Level 2, the environment shifted again. Consequence. Level 3 transported me to what appeared to be a sterile laboratory setting. The interface explained this level would explore physical consequence escalation and test my threshold for causal comfort. The objectives became more bizarre. Use various implements on test subjects represented as featureless mannequins. Adjust environmental controls that cause visible discomfort to these figures. Manipulate emotional states through physical stimuli. The disembodied sounds became more frequent and distinct, definitely human reactions corresponding to my actions in the simulation. When I used a virtual scalpel on a mannequin, I heard a stifled scream. When I adjusted temperature controls to extremes, there were sounds of shivering or panting. The haptic feedback to my own body remained mild and manageable, but something about the audio felt increasingly wrong, increasingly real. I tried removing the headset, suddenly uncomfortable with whatever I was participating in, but discovered it wouldn't detach. The neural feedback pads seemed to have formed some kind of temporary bond with my skin. I called out for assistance, but no one came. Instead, the program advanced automatically to consequence level 4. The laboratory environment expanded, revealing glass-walled cells containing actual human figures rather than mannequins. Each person wore equipment similar to mine, but with more extensive neural pads covering much of their bodies. With sickening clarity, I realized what was happening. My virtual actions were controlling real physical sensations being delivered to actual people. The haptic feedback I was receiving was merely a fraction of what they were experiencing. An interface appeared, explicitly confirming my suspicions. Direct neural stimulation now linked. Your actions equal their consequences. Premium dark web streaming active. Current viewers, 152. Current Bitcoin revenue, 3.28. I wasn't merely a tester of new VR technology. I was an unwitting torturer providing entertainment for paying viewers on the dark web. The sensation of ice on my fingertips corresponded to freezing pain for someone else. The warmth from the candle translated to burning agony for my involuntary partner. Every interaction I'd found so impressively realistic had caused genuine suffering to someone being held in this facility. In horrified panic, I tried again to remove the equipment, pulling frantically at the headset and gloves. This triggered what the system called a non-compliance protocol, a brief but excruciating electrical shock delivered through the neural pads. A message informed me that removing the equipment prematurely would cause terminal feedback to both myself and my connected subjects. For what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, I was forced to continue participating, trying to minimize the actions that seemed to cause the most severe reactions. Eventually, a countdown timer appeared, indicating the session was nearing completion. When it reached 0, the system began a shutdown sequence, and the equipment finally released its hold on me. As the headset lifted away, I caught a glimpse of multiple screens on the booth's wall that had been hidden before. They showed various angles of rooms containing people connected to equipment similar to mine, their bodies responding to whatever was happening in their corresponding simulations. Some were clearly unconscious, others writhing in obvious distress. One screen displayed what appeared to be a bidding interface with usernames and cryptocurrency amounts. I stumbled out of the booth, dizzy and disoriented, to find the preparation room empty. The reception area was similarly deserted, with no sign of the staff who had greeted me earlier. The building's main door was unlocked, and I fled into the street, gasping for air that didn't reek of sanitizer and fear. I spent that night deliberating whether to contact the police. By morning, I convinced myself I should, but when I returned to the address with 2 officers, we found the building completely empty. No VR equipment, no booths, not even the reception desk. Just an empty industrial space with bare walls and a concrete floor. The officers took my statement but clearly didn't believe me, especially when they couldn't find any record of a company called Neosensory, registered at that address or anywhere in Manchester. 2 weeks later, I received an email from an encrypted address containing only a video file. The footage showed me during my session, my face contorted with fascination and then horror as I gradually realized what I was participating in. Below the video was a message: Level 5 access granted. Premium controller status available. Your unique neural signature has been catalogued. Distance operation now possible. I destroyed my laptop, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and moved to a different city. But I can't escape the knowledge of what I participated in, or the fear that somehow, through that brief neural connection, they still have access to me. Sometimes my fingers tingle unexpectedly, as if holding phantom controllers. Sometimes I feel the ghost of those neural pads against my skin. And sometimes, when I pass someone on the street who winces suddenly or gasps in unexpected pain, I wonder if somewhere, someone is playing a game with real consequences, using the neural signature they harvested from me as their unwitting proxy in the physical world. I wasn't looking for anything specific that night. I couldn't sleep, and I'd already burned through the usual distractions: Netflix, Reddit, old messages I shouldn't have reread. That kind of night. You're not tired, just restless. Everything's quiet, but your head won't shut up. I ended up back on the dark web. I'd messed around with it before, mostly out of curiosity. Never bought anything, never went deep. But that night, I felt pulled toward it, like I was itching for something I couldn't name. They always say you should stop scrolling when your hands start to shake, or when you feel the temperature change in the room, or when the silence becomes too loud. It's one of those internet urban legends people share to scare each other off the deep end of the web. I used to think that was all drama. Just horror fanfare for people who wanted to feel edgy. Now I think those warnings exist for a reason. It started with insomnia, that kind of mindless, late-night restlessness where nothing feels real and the smallest click can lead to hours vanishing. I was going through a rough patch, jobless, between apartments, staying in my older brother's spare room and trying to keep out of the way. My days had no structure, and my nights were filled with screen glow and silence. I had gone through every surface web rabbit hole I could find: creepy forums, niche subreddits, amateur surveillance camera archives. At some point, I started getting bored with the usual stuff. It didn't hit the same. I wasn't looking for horror exactly. I just wanted to feel something. Anything. That's when I remembered the dark web. I'd heard all the stories: fake red rooms, black market hoaxes, the usual dramatic stuff. But I also knew the tech. I knew how to navigate it safely. Or at least, I thought I did. I spun up Tails OS on an old laptop, routed through Tor, and kept my identity clean. For a while, it was just curiosity. Old message boards, empty markets, strange listings with broken links. It was like walking through an abandoned shopping mall, but with the lingering smell of something rotting just out of sight. But one thread kept coming back. It was buried inside a defunct forum with barely any traffic, mostly dead links and gibberish posts. But one thread, titled simply "Windowless," had recent activity. A few users kept responding to each other in single words, like coded check-ins. I didn't understand what they were saying, but something about how quiet the rest of the forum was made that thread feel alive, like it was pulsing just under the surface. I watched it for days before someone posted something new. They dropped a link, no fanfare, just a bare hyperlink with a timestamp and the words "real feed." It led to a login screen. I didn't have credentials, obviously, but I took a screenshot out of habit. A few minutes later, a second post appeared with a new link. This one had a different domain. I clicked it without really thinking. It brought me to a countdown. 1 minute 44 seconds. There was no text, no branding, just the timer and a black video window below it. I stared at it, trying to guess what it might be. The chat was open, but it was locked. I couldn't post, only watch. The numbers ticked down. I almost closed the tab. But something made me wait. Maybe it was the way the screen made everything around me feel darker. Or maybe I was just curious in a way I didn't want to admit. The hum of the air conditioning sounded distant, like I was sinking below something. When the timer hit 0, the feed activated. The screen lit up with a dim, grainy video of a room. Small, concrete, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, a chain on the back wall. Nothing else. At first it was empty. I thought maybe it was a hoax, another ARG, something theatrical. But then a figure stepped into frame. Not the person I expected. It was a man in dark clothes, face obscured. He looked into the camera briefly, then left the frame. A few seconds later, he returned, dragging someone. The person's face was hidden, but they were conscious, struggling weakly, hands tied. They were shoved into the chair and strapped in. The chat exploded. Lines of text flew by. Most of it was incomprehensible. Users bidding, commenting, laughing. Some posted emojis. Others just spammed numbers. There was a list forming on the right. Usernames next to dollar amounts. And at the top of the list was a name I recognized. Mine. It didn't make sense. I hadn't logged in. I hadn't made an account. But there it was. My username from an old game account I hadn't used in years, spelled exactly the same. And next to it, a bid, £8,300. I felt something drop in my chest. My hands were sweating. I reached for the mouse, but it lagged. The screen flickered. The video kept going. The person in the chair looked up. Even with the resolution as bad as it was, I could see the fear in their face. They were crying, muffled. Their eyes scanned the room like they were looking for a way out, and for some awful reason, I felt like they could see me, like I wasn't just watching, like I was part of it. The camera zoomed in slightly. More bids came in, more usernames I didn't recognize, but mine stayed near the top. Then the figure came back, holding something, a blunt object. The way he moved was calm, mechanical, and just before the feed cut out, he looked directly at the camera. The screen went black. The chat froze. Then the browser closed itself. I sat there staring at my desktop, heart racing. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't clicked anything except the link. How did it know my name? That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, or what little I could see of it, staring through the screen. Not like he was performing, like he was watching me. The next day, I got an email. No subject line. Just an image. A photo of my house, taken from the street. It wasn't recent. It had to be at least a year old, before I moved. But it was mine. You could see my old car in the driveway, the busted mailbox I never fixed. More messages came after that, each one from a different address. Most just contained links. I didn't click them. One had a video attachment. I deleted it without opening it. Even hovering over it made my skin crawl. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 10 seconds of silence, followed by the sound of something metal scraping across concrete. I left the house that night. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove. Slept in a motel an hour away. Threw the laptop in a dumpster behind a gas station. Bought a new phone the next morning. But it didn't matter, because the next morning, there was a piece of paper tucked under the motel door. Just one sentence. Your bid was accepted. I don't know how they found me. Maybe they'd never lost me. I moved across the country after that. Changed my name. Got a job under the table. No credit cards. No internet in my name. I even stopped using public Wi-Fi. I did everything you're supposed to do when you want to disappear. And for a while, I thought I'd done it. It worked. For almost a year. Until last week. I found a box outside my door. No postage, no return address. Just sitting there like someone had placed it and walked away. Inside was a single item. A webcam. Old, dusty, with a cracked lens. The kind you'd plug into a desktop tower back in 2005. I hadn't seen one like it in years. Underneath it, there was a folded note. Smile for the feed. I haven't turned on a screen since, and I don't think I ever will again. I used to think some people just changed, that it was a normal part of growing up. People drift, get bitter, harden. That was how I explained what happened to her for a long time. I told myself she just became someone else, that it wasn't personal. It took me years to admit it wasn't normal at all. Her name was Ava. We were best friends growing up, same street, same school, same everything. There wasn't a single sleepover or birthday party where she wasn't there. For years, we were like our own little orbit. She was smart and weird in a good way. The kind of kid who made up stories during lunch and drew creepy comics in the margins of her notebooks. I liked that about her. She made boring things feel alive. Then she disappeared. It was the summer after graduation. No big send-off, no party. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Her aunt posted some photo on Facebook of Ava in Italy or Greece, some old town with narrow stone streets. I hadn't even known she was leaving. I messaged her more than once. No replies. Eventually, I stopped. Not because I was mad, but because I didn't want to feel like I was bothering her. I figured maybe she needed space or just wanted a fresh start. She came back 2 years later. It wasn't announced. There was no big reunion. I just ran into her at a petrol station of all places. I remember how weirdly bright it was inside, the way bad fluorescent lighting always is. I saw her before she saw me. And even though her face hadn't changed much, I felt something tighten in my chest. Her eyes weren't the same. It wasn't anything like you see in some movies, where they can literally see darkness or whatever. But the way she looked at me, it was like I was an inconvenience, like she'd already moved on and was annoyed I hadn't. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, just gave me a flat hey and grabbed her receipt. I stood there like an idiot holding a Fanta. I didn't even say much, just something like, "You're back." And she nodded and walked out. That was it. I tried to reach out again, occasionally texting her. I got nothing back. I ran into her once more at a grocery store. Same deal, cold, flat, not mean, just completely uninterested. After a while, I gave up, and I told myself maybe that was fine. Maybe people don't always owe you an explanation for who they become. But part of me kept replaying that first moment in the gas station, the way she looked through me. That brings me to last year. It was a Saturday night, early fall. I was home alone, half watching a YouTube documentary with the volume low. My phone was face down. I remember the exact buzz it made, that long one, the kind you get with messages from people not in your contacts. I don't know why I even checked it. It was from Ava, or at least from her number. There wasn't a message, just a link, no context, no greeting. Just a string of random characters and a .onion address buried in the middle. I stared at it for probably a full minute. I didn't even breathe. My first thought was that it was a scam or malware, but some part of me, the old part that still remembered how close we were, told me she sent it on purpose, that there was a reason. I used an old laptop, booted it into Tails. I'd played with Tor before years ago, but never for anything like this. My hands were clammy the whole time. I told myself if anything looked shady, I'd kill the power immediately. The page took almost a full minute to load. When it finally did, it was just a black screen with a timer. 0248, just under 3 minutes. It counted down in red, and underneath it was a chat box already going. Lines of text, constant, some of it in languages I couldn't read. The rest was English, but coded, like slang or shorthand. I couldn't tell what they were talking about at first. When the timer hit 0, the stream flickered on. There was a chair in the middle of a concrete room. It was bolted to the floor, but empty. The room was completely empty, as far as I could see, with no windows. Just the hum of overhead lights and the faint echo of someone walking, somewhere off camera. I still didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the chat changed. People were typing numbers, making bids. Usernames I didn't recognize were posting names. Some were fake, some felt too real. One of them was next pick, pull from chat. That's when I felt my stomach turn. I scrolled up to try and make sense of it, and that's when I saw her, Avenue, or what had to be her. Not her real name, but an old handle she used in middle school. I hadn't seen it in years. No one else could have remembered that. She was active, posting, typing like she belonged there. Then I saw it. Bid. £9,400. Then my name. M. Full name. Spelled correctly, properly capitalized, just sitting there like any other text. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. Couldn't even close the tab. I just sat there watching more usernames chime in. Seconded. Confirmed. Show us the face. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged it. Yanked the battery like that would somehow protect me. My ears were ringing. It was like that high-pitched tone you get when your body goes into survival mode. I don't remember standing up. I just remember pacing, hands shaking, heart doing this sick little flutter in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't know. 1 voicemail. It was 10 seconds of silence, then the sound of something scraping across concrete. That same sound from the stream. I threw the phone out, got a new number. Emails came next, one-liners. Things like, "We'll find you," or "Don't bother running." They were always from different addresses. Always with some little detail to let me know it was personal. I deleted everything and removed all of my private info off social media. I did my best to erase any trace of myself online. But the more I scrubbed, the more I realized how much of me was still floating out there. Then came the people. At first, I convinced myself it was just paranoia. I would walk to the store and feel the weight of someone behind me. I would glance out the window and see a car idling across the street, longer than made sense for someone doing nothing. But the patterns kept repeating. It was the same car, the same face. Not every day, but often enough to notice. Different angles, different times, always nearby, always lingering just long enough to register, but never long enough to confront. Eventually, I filed a police report. It was a waste of time. There were no direct threats, no evidence. They told me to block the emails and vary my daily routines. I had already done that. So I left. I moved to a different city. I changed my name. I found a place to rent off the books and stayed disconnected. I deleted every trace of myself online, and I stopped using any account tied to my real identity. For a while, I believed I was safe. That changed last week. Someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me walking home taken from behind. The framing was deliberate. The image was clear. It was taken recently, close and carefully. There was no note, no sender, no explanation, only the photograph. Now I am packing again, because wherever Ava is, whatever she has become, she saw me. And this time, she chose me. So I've been putting this off for a while now, but I think I need to tell someone what happened last summer. My so-called therapist says I should write it all down, but I keep cancelling appointments. Talking to a professional feels too official, you know. Like once it's in my records, it's out there forever. But I can't keep it bottled up anymore, so I figured I'd just type it out. This all happened about 8 months ago when I was backpacking through Eastern Europe. I just finished uni and wanted to travel a bit before settling into the whole career thing. I'm not exactly loaded, so I was doing the whole hostel hopping budget travel experience. It was amazing mostly, meeting new people, seeing incredible places, all that. But what happened in Budapest? That's the part I'm still trying to process. I'd been in the city for 3 days staying at this hostel near the Jewish quarter. Nice enough place, but their Wi-Fi was absolute rubbish. I needed to book my next train ticket and check in with my parents, so I headed to this internet cafe about 10 minutes away. The place was a bit of a throwback, honestly, kind of dingy with these partitioned computer stations and outdated PCs, but it was cheap, only about 200 forints per hour, that's like 50 pence, and they had decent coffee. I went in around 7 p.m. after spending the day at the thermal baths. The cafe was pretty quiet, just the owner behind the counter, half asleep, watching something on his phone, and a couple of teenagers playing some online game in the corner. I paid for 2 hours and got assigned to station number 12 near the back wall. When I sat down, I noticed the computer was already on. Not just on, but logged into a browser session. I figured the last person must have just forgotten to log out properly. I was about to close everything and start fresh when I noticed one of the tabs was still loading something. You know when you're a bit nosy about what other people are looking at online? It was like that, just this fleeting curiosity about what the previous user had been browsing. I clicked on the tab, thinking it would be something mundane like Facebook or YouTube. The page that loaded was nothing like that. It took a moment to fully render, but I immediately recognized the browser. It was Tor. I'd never actually used it myself, but I knew what it was for. Accessing the dark web. I'd heard plenty of stories from my friend who studied computer science, all those urban legends about red rooms and black markets. I always thought they were exaggerated, you know. The page itself looked pretty basic. Black background with minimal text. There was a video player in the center that was buffering, and a chat window on the right with messages scrolling by too quickly to read. The video's thumbnail was blurry, but it looked like some kind of room with dim lighting. I should have closed it immediately. That would have been the normal, sensible reaction. But there's this weird thing that happens sometimes. The more you know you shouldn't look at something, the more compelling it becomes. I just sat there, watching the loading circle spin, telling myself I'd close it once I saw what it was, just to satisfy my curiosity. When the video finally loaded, it showed what looked like a basement or cellar. The walls were concrete, and there was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was mostly empty, except for a chair in the middle, and some equipment on the table that I couldn't quite make out. The video quality was poor and grainy, but it was definitely a live stream. There was a timestamp in the corner, and the chat was reacting to something happening. I remember feeling a cold weight in my stomach as I realized what I might be looking at. This wasn't some fake horror stream or art project. There was something genuinely unsettling about how raw and unproduced it looked. I was about to close the tab when someone entered the frame. A person wearing a plain white mask that covered their entire face. They moved with purpose toward the camera, adjusting it slightly. The movement was so normal, so casual, that it made everything more disturbing somehow. The masked figure then turned to face the camera directly, as if looking right at the viewers. Then they raised their hand and seemed to wave. Not a greeting, but more like they were acknowledging specific people watching. I felt like they were waving at me personally, which is ridiculous, I know. But then they did something that made my blood run cold. They held up a piece of paper with writing on it. The paper had today's date and time, along with the words, "Hello Budapest, Station 12. My station, my exact location. I slammed the laptop closed instinctively, then immediately felt stupid because it wasn't my laptop. The cafe owner glanced over, but quickly went back to his phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe the previous user had been chatting with someone and had mentioned their location. Maybe it was some weird coincidence, or I'd misread it in the poor video quality. Taking a deep breath, I reopened the laptop. The browser was still there, but now the video had changed. The camera seemed to be showing a different angle of the same room, but this time focused on the table I'd noticed earlier. On it were various tools, pliers, knives, and other things I didn't want to identify. Next to them was another piece of paper, this one with what looked like a list of usernames or IDs. The chat was going crazy now, messages flying by too fast to read, but certain phrases kept jumping out as they scrolled. Station 12 is watching. We have their IP. Should we send someone? Show them what happens to voyeurs. I tried closing the browser, but it wouldn't respond. I clicked the X repeatedly, then tried Alt F4, then Ctrl Alt Delete. Nothing worked. The screen flickered briefly, and then the video feed changed again. This time, it showed the exterior of a building. With a sickening lurch in my stomach, I recognized it. It was the internet cafe I was sitting in, filmed from across the street. The timestamp showed it was live footage, right now. As I watched, frozen, the camera zoomed in on the windows, panning slowly across until it focused on my station. I could see myself through the window, illuminated by the screen's glow, staring wide-eyed at the monitor. That's when I completely lost it. I jumped up, knocking over my chair, and rushed to the counter. I told the owner there was something wrong with the computer, that I thought it might have been hacked. He just shrugged, clearly not bothered, and said he'd restart it later. I asked him if the previous user had left recently, trying to keep my voice steady. He told me no one had used that station all day. I was the first customer to sit there. I felt physically sick at that point. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, glancing across the street to see if anyone was there with a camera. The street was busy with evening traffic and pedestrians, but no one seemed to be filming. As I pushed the door open, my phone buzzed with a notification, a message from an unknown number. Enjoying Budapest, Station 12. We see you. Don't worry about paying for your time. We've taken care of it. We've taken care of everything. I ran all the way back to my hostel without stopping, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I got to my room, I threw my stuff together and checked out immediately, forfeiting the money I'd paid for the next 2 nights. I caught the first train out the next morning to Vienna, and I didn't use a public computer or Wi-Fi for the rest of my trip. For weeks afterwards, I kept getting text messages from different numbers. They were always brief, just enough to let me know I was still being watched. One came through when I was at dinner in Paris. Red wine stains white shirts. Be careful. I'd spilled wine on myself just moments before. Another came when I was back home in London. Your new flat has nice windows, easy to see inside at night. I've moved twice since then. I've gone through every possible explanation for what happened. The most rational one is that someone hacked the computer at the cafe and used its webcam to see me, then used my phone number from the cafe's sign-in system. But that doesn't explain how they're still finding me, or how they know details about my daily life that aren't online. I've changed my phone, my email, even my name on social media. I've installed security systems and keep my curtains closed at all times, but the messages still come through occasionally. The last one arrived yesterday. Miss Budapest, we miss you. Station 12 is always reserved for you. I don't know what these people want or why they chose me. Maybe I just stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. Maybe it was all just an elaborate scare tactic aimed at random dark web voyeurs. But I can't shake the feeling that by clicking that tab, I somehow put myself on a list that I can't get off of. Like by witnessing whatever twisted thing was happening in that basement, I became part of it somehow. So that's my story. I still haven't gone to the police. What would I even tell them? That I accidentally accessed some creepy dark web stream and now I'm being stalked by anonymous messages. They'd think I was paranoid or making it up. I'm telling you this partly as a warning. Be careful about the digital footprints you leave, even ones you don't realize you're creating. That random computer in an internet cafe might not be as anonymous as you think. And if you ever find yourself looking at a browser session someone else left open, just close it. Some nightmares aren't meant to be shared, and once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. I keep thinking about that list of names I glimpsed on the table in the video. I wonder how many others like me are out there, jumping at shadows and changing their phone numbers every few weeks. I wonder if they also made the mistake of clicking on someone else's session, picking up a nightmare that wasn't theirs to begin with. It's strange how the most life-changing discoveries can come from the most mundane tasks. 5 months ago, while cleaning up my digital clutter, I found something that has completely destroyed my sense of security and trust. I've moved house twice since then, changed my phone number, and still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I'm writing this down partly as a warning, but mostly because keeping it to myself is driving me insane. I work in IT support for a university in Manchester. Nothing glamorous, just fixing printers, resetting passwords, and explaining to professors why they shouldn't click on suspicious email links. I've always been organized with my physical possessions, but absolutely terrible with digital housekeeping. My desktop was always a mess of random files. My download folder, a digital wasteland of forgotten PDFs and installation packages. My bad habits caught up with me when my laptop started running painfully slow. After putting it off for months, I finally set aside a Sunday afternoon to do a proper digital cleanup. I was living alone in a small flat near the university, having recently broken up with my girlfriend of 3 years. She'd moved to Edinburgh for work, and neither of us wanted the hassle of a long-distance relationship. So there I was, single again, at 32, spending my weekend deleting old files, while rain pelted against my windows. I started with the obvious stuff, emptying the recycle bin, clearing my downloads folder, uninstalling unused programs. Then I moved on to my email accounts, where years of newsletters, promotional offers, and spam had accumulated. I had 3 accounts that needed attention: my work email, my personal Gmail, and an old Hotmail account I'd had since university that I mainly kept for nostalgia and as a backup. The Hotmail account was the worst. Over 15,000 unread messages dating back to 2008. I was about to mass delete everything when I noticed the junk folder had a notification showing 246 items. Curious about what the spam filter had caught, I clicked on it. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Penis enlargement offers, fake lottery wins, phishing attempts. But as I scrolled down, I noticed something odd. There were several emails from the same address. Just a string of numbers and letters at a domain I didn't recognize. Each had an attachment named with a date, going back about 2 years. The most recent one was from just a week earlier. Now, I know better than to open random attachments, especially from my junk folder. That's literally part of what I teach in the basic IT security workshops for new staff. But something about the systematic naming and regular frequency made me pause. These didn't look like typical spam. They looked almost like scheduled reports. Against my better judgment, I opened the most recent email. There was no message, just a text file attachment. I scanned it with my antivirus before opening it, and it came back clean. When I opened the file, I found what appeared to be login credentials and instructions. There was a long string of characters labeled onion URL, followed by a username and password. Below that were brief instructions. Use Tor browser only. Log in within 24 hours of receipt or credentials will reset. Do not share access. Monthly payment confirmed. I recognized the reference to an onion URL and Tor. This was clearly related to the dark web. But why was someone sending these details to my old email address? And what was this about a monthly payment? I checked the other emails and found they all contained similar text files, each with different credentials but the same instructions. The dates corresponded to the first day of each month, like clockwork. My first thought was that these were meant for someone else. Perhaps the previous owner of my email address, though I'd had this account since I was an undergraduate. My second thought was more unsettling. What if someone was using my forgotten email account for something illegal? I should have deleted everything right then, should have changed my password, set up two-factor authentication, and forgotten all about it. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when you're bored and alone on a rainy Sunday. I told myself I was just being responsible. If someone was using my email for something illegal, I should know about it, right? So I downloaded the Tor browser, something I'd never used before despite working in IT. I told myself it was just research, that I would take a quick look and then report anything suspicious to the proper authorities. I copied the onion URL from the text file and pasted it into the Tor browser. It directed me to what looked like a login page with a minimalist black background. No site name, no logo, no indication of what this was for. Just username and password fields. Heart racing, I entered the credentials from the text file. The site loaded to what appeared to be a video hosting platform, similar to YouTube but with a much simpler interface. There were about 24 thumbnails organized in a grid, each showing what looked like CCTV footage of different rooms in a house. Some showed living rooms, others bedrooms, kitchens, even bathrooms. Each thumbnail had a date and timestamp from the previous month. I clicked on one that showed a living room. The video played, showing a completely ordinary scene. A woman in her 30s sitting on a sofa watching television while scrolling on her phone. The footage lasted about 5 minutes, during which nothing remarkable happened. She got up at one point to leave the room, came back with a glass of water, and resumed watching TV. I tried another video, this one of a kitchen. A man was cooking dinner while listening to music. Again, completely mundane. I clicked through several more videos, all showing similar everyday moments in people's lives. It was like watching the most boring reality show ever made. Then it hit me. These weren't actors. These weren't people who knew they were being filmed. These were private moments in private homes, recorded without consent. I was looking at footage from hacked security cameras or compromised devices. My stomach churned as the implications sank in. Someone had been using my forgotten email account as a way to distribute access to what amounted to illegal surveillance. And according to the instructions, someone was paying monthly for this access. I immediately closed the browser, feeling sick with guilt and fear. I'd just watched people who had no idea they were being observed. I'd invaded their privacy, even if unintentionally. And now my IP address was connected to this site, even though I'd used Tor. I spent the next hour changing all my passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on every account I had, and scanning my computer for malware. I debated whether to report what I'd found to the police, but hesitated. How would I explain that I'd accessed the site? Would they believe I had stumbled upon it innocently? Instead, I decided to send an anonymous tip to the cybercrime unit, providing the email address and a general description of what I'd found, but not mentioning my connection to it. I hoped they would investigate and shut down whatever operation this was. For the next week, I jumped at every notification on my phone, half expecting police to show up at my door. Nothing happened. No response to my tip. No suspicious activity on any of my accounts. I started to relax a little, telling myself that I'd done the right thing and could now move on. Then, exactly 1 month after discovering the emails, I received a message on my personal Gmail account, the one I actually used regularly. The subject line was missed payment, and it was from the same string of numbers and letters as the Hotmail emails. The message was brief. Payment interrupted. Service will terminate unless restored within 48 hours. Recent access from unauthorized location has been noted. My blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this knew that someone different had accessed the account. They had connected my old Hotmail to my current Gmail. They knew who I was. That same night, I noticed something strange. While watching Netflix on my laptop, the webcam light briefly flickered on, then off. It could have been a glitch, but combined with the email, it sent me into a panic. I covered the camera with tape, but the damage to my peace of mind was done. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I was convinced my devices had been compromised, that someone was watching me through my own technology. I started unplugging my router at night, covering all camera lenses, even disconnecting my smart TV. 2 weeks after the missed payment email, I came home from work to find my flat had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, not my laptop, not my TV, not even the cash I kept in my desk drawer. The only thing disturbed was my bedside table, where my diary had been moved. I reported the break-in to the police, but without anything stolen, they didn't seem particularly concerned. I didn't tell them about the emails or the website. It seemed too disconnected, too paranoid. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the building, every passing car outside sent my heart racing. Around 3 a.m., I got up to make tea and noticed my laptop was open on the kitchen table. Not where I'd left it, and certainly not how I'd left it. On the screen was a text document containing addresses and personal information about the people I'd seen in those videos. Below their information was my own, my full name, address, workplace, parents' address, and the routes I typically took to work. At the bottom was a simple message: witnesses are participants. Participants are responsible. I packed a bag and left that night, staying with a friend while I looked for a new place to live. I told everyone I'd had a plumbing disaster in my flat that made it uninhabitable. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, even considered changing jobs. It's been 5 months since then. I've moved twice, switching cities entirely the second time. I live completely offline now. No social media, no cloud storage, no smart devices. I'm writing this on a new laptop that has never been connected to my name in any way. But sometimes, I still see the webcam light flicker when I'm working late. Sometimes, I receive blank emails from addresses I don't recognize. And last week, I found a note on my car windscreen with just an Onion URL written on it. Different from the original one, but unmistakably similar in format. I don't know who these people are or why they chose my forgotten email account for their operation. I don't know if they're still watching those unsuspecting people or if they're now watching me instead. All I know is that somewhere in the vastness of the dark web, there are people who consider me a loose end that needs tying up. So if you ever find something unexpected while clearing out your digital junk, something that doesn't quite make sense, something that perhaps wasn't meant for you, delete it, close it, forget you ever saw it, because once you've seen something you shouldn't, there's no going back. And in the dark corners of the internet, there are people who will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their secrets.